I still remember the exact moment I realized I was the only one. It was March 15th, 2024, and I was standing in my kitchen at 7:30 a.m., coffee mug in hand, when it hit me like a punch to the gut. Today was Grandma Rose's 87th birthday, and I hadn't received a single text from any of my family members asking about plans or coordinating gifts. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through our family group chat. Nothing. Not even a casual mention. I checked my calendar twice, thinking maybe I'd gotten the date wrong, but there it was, marked in bright red. Grandma's birthday. Don't forget. I'd been the family coordinator for years, the one who remembered anniversaries, planned reunions, and made sure everyone knew about important dates. But this year, I'd been so overwhelmed with my divorce proceedings and starting my new job that I deliberately stepped back, hoping someone else would take the initiative. I thought maybe my sister Jennifer would step up, or my brother Mark, or even one of my cousins. But here I was, standing in my empty apartment, realizing that without me constantly reminding everyone, they'd all just forgotten about our grandmother, the woman who raised 3 of us when our parents were too busy fighting to notice we existed. I felt this burning sensation in my chest, like I'd swallowed acid. How could they forget? How could Jennifer, who called Grandma every Sunday to complain about her marriage, just let the day pass? How could Mark, who still borrowed money from her at 35, not even remember? My hands were shaking as I called Jennifer first. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding rushed. "Oh my God, Sarah, is that today? I've been so busy with Emma's soccer tournament and Tyler's piano recital, I completely lost track. Can you just get something nice from all of us? I'll Venmo you. That's it." That's all she said. Not even an apology that felt real, just a quick solution to make the problem go away. I hung up feeling even worse. Mark was worse. He laughed when I told him. Actually laughed. "Come on, Sarah, she's not going to care if we're a day late. She probably doesn't even remember what day it is half the time anyway." I wanted to scream at him. Grandma Rose was sharper than all of us combined. She still did crossword puzzles in ink, still balanced her checkbook to the penny, still remembered every birthday, anniversary, and graduation in our extended family of 23 people. But I didn't scream. Instead, I did what I always did. I fixed it. I called the florist, ordered the biggest arrangement they had, and drove 45 minutes to the assisted living facility, where Grandma had been living for the past 2 years. The Sunset Manor was one of those places that tried too hard to not look like what it was. Beige walls, motivational posters, and the persistent smell of disinfectant mixed with overcooked vegetables. I'd been visiting twice a month since she moved in, but today felt different. Today I was carrying the weight of being the only one who cared enough to show up. I found her in the community room, sitting by herself at a small table, working on a jigsaw puzzle. She was wearing the blue cardigan I'd gotten her last Christmas, and her silver hair was perfectly styled. She'd always been beautiful, but there was something fragile about her now that made my heart ache. "Sarah, sweetheart," she said when she saw me, her whole face lighting up. What a wonderful surprise. I set the flowers on the table and watched her eyes fill with tears. "Happy birthday, Grandma. I'm sorry I'm the only one here." She reached out and squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Oh, honey, you're not the only one. You're the most important one." We spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her physical therapy sessions, about the new resident who played piano too loudly, about how she'd been thinking about Grandpa Earl more lately. I told her about my new job at the marketing firm, about how I was finally feeling like myself again after the divorce. But there was something different about her today. She kept looking at me with this intense expression, like she was trying to memorize my face, or maybe trying to decide something important. Finally, she stood up slowly and took my arm. "Sarah, dear, would you help me back to my room? There's something I need to show you." Her room was small but cozy, decorated with photos of all of us, and her collection of ceramic birds. She moved to her dresser and pulled out a small wooden box I'd never seen before. "Sit down, honey," she said, patting the bed beside her. "I've been waiting for the right time to share this with you, and I think today is that day." My heart started pounding. There was something about her tone, serious and careful, that made me nervous. She opened the box and pulled out a stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The paper looked old, yellowed at the edges, and I could see elegant handwriting in blue ink. "These are love letters," she said simply, "but not from your grandfather." I stared at her, not understanding. Grandma Rose and Grandpa Earl had been married for 52 years before he passed. They were the love story our family always pointed to as proof that real love existed. "I don't understand," I said. She untied the ribbon with trembling fingers and pulled out the first letter. "Before I married your grandfather, I was in love with someone else. Someone I thought I'd spend my life with." She handed me the letter, and I saw it was addressed to Rose Marie Sullivan, her maiden name. The return address made my blood run cold. James Mitchell, 1247, Oak Street, our town. Mitchell. That was my ex-husband's last name. That was David's father's family name. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Mitchell?" She nodded, watching my face carefully. James Mitchell was David's grandfather. We were engaged, Sarah. We were supposed to be married in June of 1959. The room started spinning. I felt like I was going to throw up. David and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5. We'd just finalized our divorce 2 months ago, and now I was finding out that our grandparents had been lovers. "What happened?" I managed to ask. She was quiet for a long moment, looking down at her hands. "The war happened. Not the big war, but the smaller one we were fighting in Korea. James was drafted and he left 2 weeks before our wedding. We wrote letters every day for months." She pulled out another letter, this one more worn than the first. "He was supposed to come home for Christmas in 1959. We were going to elope, have a small ceremony, start our life together. But then—" Her voice broke, and I saw tears rolling down her cheeks. "Then what, Grandma?" "He was killed 3 days before he was supposed to come home. December 22nd, 1959. I got the letter from the army on Christmas Eve." I felt tears burning my own eyes. I reached out and took her hand, and we sat there in silence for a moment. I was 21 years old, and I thought my life was over. I'd already quit my job at the department store because we were planning to move to California, where James had a job lined up. I'd given up my apartment, sold most of my things. I had nothing left. She wiped her eyes and continued. "Your grandfather was James's best friend. They'd grown up together, gone to school together. When James died, Earl was the one who came to tell me. He was the one who held me while I cried. He was the one who helped me pick up the pieces." I was starting to understand. "And you fell in love with him?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "That came later. At first I married him because I needed to survive. Because I was pregnant." The world stopped. I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. "Pregnant?" "With your father," she said quietly. "James and I, we were young and in love, and we thought we were going to be married in 2 weeks. We didn't wait. My father was James Mitchell's son, which meant David and I we were second cousins. We were related." I stood up abruptly, my head spinning. This was too much. This was impossible. "Sarah, sit down, please," Grandma said gently. "Let me finish." I sat back down, but I felt like I was going to collapse. She continued speaking, her voice steady despite the tears. "Earl knew. He knew the baby wasn't his, but he married me anyway. He said he loved me, and he loved the baby because it was part of me. He said James would have wanted him to take care of us." She pulled out a photograph from the box. It was a picture of a young man in a military uniform, dark hair, serious eyes. He looked exactly like David. Your father never knew. Earl was the only father he ever knew, and Earl loved him completely. They had 5 more children together, and Earl never once treated your father differently. I stared at the photograph, seeing David's face, seeing my father's face, seeing the resemblance I'd never noticed before. But Earl and we never had the kind of love I'd had with James. We had a good marriage, a solid marriage, but it was built on gratitude and respect and shared responsibility, not on the kind of passion that makes you feel like you're flying. She looked at me intently. Until I watched you with David, watching you two together, seeing how happy you were, how much you loved each other. It reminded me of what I'd had with James. It was the same intensity, the same joy. I started crying then, really crying, because she was right. What David and I had was exactly that, flying. Even when we fought, even when we drove each other crazy, there was this electric connection between us that made everything else fade away. That's why I never said anything, she continued, because I could see how much you loved each other. And I thought maybe it was fate. Maybe James and I were meant to be together, and when that didn't happen, maybe our grandchildren were meant to find each other instead. But we're related, I sobbed. We're cousins. That's why we could never have children. That's why I kept miscarrying. She pulled me into her arms and held me while I cried. I'd had 3 miscarriages during my marriage to David. 3 babies we'd lost. 3 times we'd hoped and planned and dreamed, only to have it all taken away. The doctors had never been able to explain why. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." I thought about the genetics, but second cousins. It's usually not a problem. People marry their second cousins all the time. But the miscarriages could have been anything. Could have been stress. Could have been bad luck. Could have been a dozen different things. You can't blame yourself, and you can't blame the family connection. I pulled back and looked at her through my tears. "But why are you telling me this now? Why today?" "Because I saw how devastated you were when you divorced. Because I've watched you blame yourself for not being able to give David children. Because I've seen you pull away from the family, thinking you're not important, thinking no one cares about you." She cupped my face in her hands. "You are the most important person in this family, Sarah. You're the one who holds us all together. You're the one who remembers birthdays and organizes reunions and makes sure everyone feels loved. You're the one who came here today when no one else did." I started crying again, but this time it felt different, cleaner somehow. "And I wanted you to know that you come from love, real, deep, powerful love. Your great-grandfather James loved me with everything he had, and that love lives on in you, in your capacity to care for people, in your loyalty, in your strength." She handed me the letters. "These are yours now. Read them when you're ready. Learn about where you came from, and don't you dare think for 1 second that you're not important or that you don't matter." I stayed with her for another 2 hours, reading through some of the letters, looking at more photographs, hearing stories I'd never heard before. James had been a writer, someone who dreamed of publishing novels. He'd been funny and kind and incredibly romantic. The letters were beautiful, full of poetry and hope and plans for their future. When I finally left the facility, I felt like I was carrying a piece of history with me. But more than that, I felt like I understood something about myself that I'd never understood before. I drove home thinking about David, about our marriage, about the love we'd shared. We'd divorced because we wanted different things. He wanted to keep trying for children. I wanted to accept that it might not happen and focus on other dreams. We'd divorced because we were exhausted from grief and disappointment and the pressure of constantly hoping. But we'd never stopped loving each other. Even during the worst fights, even when we were signing papers and dividing up our books and furniture, there was still this underlying current of deep affection and respect. I thought about calling him, telling him what I'd learned, But I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. I needed time to process, to understand what this meant for me, for us, for our future. Instead, I called Jennifer and Mark and told them both exactly what I thought about them forgetting Grandma's birthday. I told them how disappointed I was, how tired I was of being the only one who seemed to care about family traditions and staying connected. Jennifer cried and apologized. Mark got defensive and then eventually apologized too. They both promised to do better, to be more present, to take some of the burden off me. I don't know if they'll keep those promises, but for the first time in years, I don't feel like it's entirely my responsibility to make sure they do. That night, I sat in my apartment reading James's letters by candlelight. He wrote about his dreams for their life together, about the house they'd buy, about the children they'd have, about growing old together. He wrote about how much he loved Rose's laugh, how beautiful she looked in blue, how proud he was to be with someone so smart and strong. And I realized that I was reading about the kind of love I'd had with David. The kind of love that doesn't come around often, the kind that's worth fighting for, worth trying again. I also realized that the family secret Grandma had shared wasn't really about genetics or cousins, or even about James and Rose. It was about love persisting across generations, about how the capacity to love deeply gets passed down, even when the specific love story doesn't work out. 3 months later, I called David. We met for coffee, and I told him everything. About Grandma's letters, about James and Rose, about our family connection. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Does it change anything? How you feel about what we had?" I thought about it carefully. "No," I said. "It makes me understand it better, but it doesn't change it." He nodded. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately, about us, about whether we gave up too easily." I'd been thinking the same thing. We'd been so focused on what we couldn't have that we'd lost sight of what we did have. We'd been so consumed by grief that we'd forgotten about joy. We started seeing each other again, slowly, carefully. We talked about everything we'd been through, about our mistakes, about what we wanted going forward. We went to couples therapy. We talked about adoption, about other ways to build a family. 6 months later, we remarried. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Grandma Rose was there, sitting in the front row, wearing the blue cardigan and a huge smile. During the reception, she pulled me aside and whispered, "James would have loved this. He would have been so happy to see his great-granddaughter find her way back to love." I looked across the room at David, who was laughing with my father, his biological grandfather, though neither of them knew it. I thought about the complicated web of family connections, about love stories that span generations, about the mysterious ways that hearts find each other. And I thought about how I'd been the only one to remember Grandma's birthday that day, how frustrated and hurt I'd felt. But if I hadn't been the only one, if someone else had shown up with flowers and stayed for the afternoon, I might never have heard the story about James and Rose. I might never have understood where I came from, or why love felt so important to me. Sometimes being the only one who remembers, the only one who shows up, the only one who cares enough to try, sometimes that's exactly where you need to be, to discover something that changes everything. Today, David and I have been remarried for 8 months. We're in the process of adopting a little girl named Emma, who's been in foster care for 2 years. She's 6 years old, loves puzzles just like Grandma Rose, and has already started calling us Mom and Dad. And every month, without fail, I visit Grandma Rose at Sunset Manor. Sometimes Jennifer comes with me, sometimes Mark, sometimes David, but whether anyone else shows up or not, I'm always there. Because I learned that being the one who remembers isn't a burden, it's a gift. It's how love stays alive across generations. It's how family stories get preserved and passed down. It's how people stay connected even when life gets complicated and messy and hard. And sometimes, When you're the only one who remembers to show up, you discover that you're exactly where you need to be to receive something precious that's been waiting for you all along.